Welcome to Selling in the Motor Trade, in association with Automotive Management and SymcoTraining. This is the weekly podcast where we share best practice, tips, and ideas on how to sell more cars, improve your service department, and generally put more profit into your dealership or dealer group. I'm your host, Simon Bowkett, or some of you might already know me as Skippy. And firstly, I want to say thank you for taking the time to tune in. What separates the good from the great? What separates the people that really stand out, okay, compared to the ones that they're not going to make it? What are their character traits?
Focus and intensity. The best dealers are dealers that have a focus on their business. They don't necessarily have the best golf handicap, but they have a focus on their business. They walk in. I wrote an article in Auto Dealer Today magazine, and it is the most read article that was ever in that magazine. And it was 20 things a general manager needs to do every week.
Okay.
And that article is the most read article. You can still Google that article up, 20 things a general manager needs to do every week by James Ziegler. It is still being looked at, read, reread, passed around. 20 group of dealers are discussing that article because what does a dealer or general manager, an operating partner, need to do to run a car dealership? I teach classes at Northwood University, which is the school for auto dealers. There is a 4-year accredited college university here, Northwood University, 2 campuses, one in West Palm Beach and one in Detroit. I teach at the one in Detroit virtually on video.
Yep.
I teach a class on general manager. How to operate a car dealership, and people, and like you say, people see the jewelry.
Yeah.
they see the hat, they see the swagger, they see me bragging. I have no humility whatsoever.
I would never have picked up on that. None at all. What did you say to me before? You're like, who was do you like yourself to?
Burt Reynolds, Smokey and the Bandit.
Smokey and the Bandit, yeah.
What did Sally Field say to him? She said, "What do you do?" And he said, "I show off."
That was the phrase I was looking for. I show off. And guys, people listen to this podcast. Jim has the jewelry on. He has the watch on. He has the hat, which I've never seen you without a hat, sir.
You are not. I am completely bald.
Okay, and that's the persona. That is the character that I love. And
it's a cartoon character I created. Don't think Jim Ziegler is the alpha dog. The alpha dog is a character.
Yeah.
The intellectual dynamics, who is Jim Ziegler, is another complete person.
Yeah, it is. And what comes across speaking to you before this, your knowledge of the industry and actually the passion for the industry still is definitely.
I love the dealers, and I am the dealer advocate. That's the title of my column. I currently write for Digital Dealer magazine. I've written for Wards. I wrote for Auto Age. I wrote for F&I Showroom magazine, and I wrote for Auto Dealer Today. But today I am writing for Digital Dealer magazine. My latest article in Digital Dealer magazine is called "The Elephant in the Room."
Well,
you need to Google that up. Go in the current issue of Digital Dealer magazine and look at what I'm saying about the agency model. That's a big consternation with dealers internationally, right?
Definitely, and that's what we want to talk about. Let's go forward now, okay? We know that online sales is the pandemic's just sped that up. Okay, we know we've got people like Cavanna in America. We've got in the UK, we have Cinch, we have Kazoo there. There's all of these online disruptors, they call themselves. Again, when I look at these disruptors, are they really disrupting too much? I'm not entirely sure. We've got all the manufacturers, the OEMs, Okay. And by the way, Jim, that phrase OEM snuck up on me. We used to call them manufacturers when I started, but now there's the OEMs, the original.
You used to call them the factory guys.
Oh, yes.
And
Okay.
gals. And
That's
gals.
That's true. So I want to get your views now on with the online sales approach. Okay. Firstly, it's changing so much quickly. Are we the dinosaurs in the motor trade? Are dealers still going to be around? I want to get your views on the agency model, what's happening there, and the elephant in the room. And the reason why I say that, we know our Australian audience have had Honda has gone for the agency model. They're 12 months into it now. People listening to this podcast will know that Mercedes-Benz, 90%, I think, of the Australian Mercedes dealers took their manufacturer.
90%.
90%.
Go ahead.
Over this agency model. Now, last time I was at the NADA conference, though, there didn't seem to be a lot of talk. There wasn't a lot of talk about agency. It didn't seem to be on the radar with the American dealers. Is that changing now? What's your view on it?
So many are sound asleep, but they are waking up.
Mm-hmm.
In World War II, the Japanese said, "We have awakened the sleeping giant."
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? The sleeping giant, the dealers are about to awake, and they're going to look like the Frankenstein villagers chasing the monster up the hill with torches. I mean, the dealers are going to come after the manufacturers. There's already lawsuits lining up, especially Ford Motor Company.
Right.
Okay. Now Stellantis and Honda and Mercedes, they have already made great strides toward the agency model in Europe and Australia.
South Africa as well. Yeah.
And I want to tell you, it's the agency model is not going to last. It's going to crash, and it's going to crash hard. And it's going to crash hard on the executives when the stockholders wake up and realize they've all lost sales, they've lost market share, they've run off loyal customers that were brand loyal at one time, because there are other manufacturers that are not looking at that agency model so far, like Hyundai, Kia. There are manufacturers that are going to reap the benefits.
There's lots of manufacturers out here at the moment that said we're either not currently looking at the agency model. Publicly, Land Rover,
Toyota.
Publicly, JLR turned around and said, we're not looking at the agency model. 12 months later, they said, we're going to go down the agency route. Of course, Toyota famously launched with agency in the New Zealand market. Okay. And I think they looked at that as a test case. It's still happening out there. This is a tide, Jim, that I feel in Europe is coming. Are we going to hold it back? I personally don't think. I think agency's coming.
It's definitely coming, and it will crash. And it's going to be too late for a lot of the dealers who are currently, heavily invested. But it is going to crash. Now let's take Mercedes, for instance. Mercedes, what is Mercedes most concerned about? If you are a stockholder in Mercedes, or even VW, who's a bigger manufacturer, if you were, which is Audi and VW, some of the brands, if you were a corporate manufacturer like Mercedes, what would you be most concerned about? The stockholders. And who else are they concerned about? BMW. The first time BMW and Mercedes lose market share, I mean, they have gone so far as to be in fierce competition, and now Audi is in that mix. In that segment, you've got three brands. You might throw Lexus into that mix, but for the most part, the three brands were the German super group. You got VW, Audi, you've got Mercedes and BMW. Anytime BMW surpassed Mercedes in market share, the dealers were getting calls from Mercedes or vice versa. BMW would call the dealers and say, look, put 15 cars in rental service and punch them as sold. I mean, they are so concerned about their market share, and market share is going to drop because one thing the agency model is concerned with is built to order. Now, built to order is not going to work in 1,000,000, billion, trillion years. People want to see inventory on the ground, and the agency model envisions a 2,500-foot showroom, one car, and they envision consumers putting on Oculus and buying cars and doing test drives in the metaverse. That ain't gonna happen in 1,000,000, billion, trillion years. I mean, because the public wants instantaneous gratification. People say, well, Amazon does it, and Amazon's one of the models. Well, yeah, Amazon delivers to your door the next day. Manufacturers can't produce a car built to order in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months, a year. Ford Motor Company is struggling with orders that are a year overdue. And they can't produce the built to order. And there goes market share. And if I ordered a Ford and couldn't get it in 6 months, I'm going to go over to the Hyundai dealer and see what they have, or the Genesis dealer.
Well, if we have a look at what's happened over the last 2 years, we know we had semiconductor shortage. We know that we had wiring looms there. And of course, supply was hard work. The dealers, we've all made fortunes over the last 2 years. There's lots
of supply and demand.
There's lots of manufacturers publicly saying, actually, we get this now. We don't want to oversupply. We would like the idea of, actually, let's slow it down. And listen, I think a lot of consumers in Europe have had to get used to waiting. You want a Range Rover Sport, okay? Easily, it's still 18 months before you can get the spec of what you want. If you want something like any of the Germans that you're talking about, all those cars, I drive one of those cars there, and I know that I'm waiting for my new car to come through. It's going to be 6 months for the spec I want.
How many people did they lose in that transition?
Okay, you're right. Okay, so actually this build to order on the premium side of it, actually maybe the manufacturers,
the premium side.
Premium.
The premium side. Now, forget the premium side. Most people are not premium customers. Yep. You know, remember, I became who I am and you became who you are because we deal with what most of the people do most of the time. Not what some of the people will do some of the time. What people are doing, what the manufacturers are doing, they became infatuated with Tesla. The Tesla. And Tesla came in and broke the franchise laws because they did it anyway. Every Tesla franchise that opened in the U.S. was illegal, and finally the states gave up and just carved out an exception for electric vehicles. So now the manufacturers see, hey, electric vehicles aren't subject to state franchise laws in the U.S. So Ford separates immediately into two franchises, Ford and Ford Blue or whatever. I don't know what they call those franchises, but they got two electric vehicles and ICE vehicles, internal combustion engines. So now electric vehicles, which are not subject to state franchise laws in the US, Ford can divest their dealers. They don't have to keep the dealers for electric vehicles. So they think. But once again, I said in my latest article, I hope Bill Ford dusts off that apology speech he made to the dealers when he had to fire Jack Nasser in 2000, because he's going to need it again, because I think they're going to have a whole bunch of top executives that they're going to wake up and say, oh my gosh, our competitors took our market share. We're not producing cars. Our dealers have bailed out. And now, Simon, one thing you and I did not talk about, and I think you're going to see it in Europe, is that the big players, Sonic, AutoNation, Penske, the big players, Asbury, they've all started used car franchises with no ties to the factory.
I've got to say, our dealer groups over here, there's every big dealer group is doing that. Our clients are doing that left, right, and center. Let's go back to agency. It's a tide.
Okay, back to agency.
It's a tide I don't think is going to stop. It's coming. And if it fails or not,
they're going to try it.
They're going
it's coming, but that does not mean it's not going to fail miserably.
So what does a dealer do to prepare themselves for it?
Well, first of all, get a good solicitor, a good attorney. Class actions are starting to formulate in the United States. I've talked to a lot of dealers that are seriously talking to some of the top attorneys. One of my friends and my personal attorney is Leonard Belavia in New York, who is the class action mogul of the United States. And I'm sure that Lenny's got some things working. He and I have spoken, but I'm not going to disclose what he's got working. But there's going to be a lot of class actions. You can count on that. And that Australian class action, did you say 650 million Australian dollars?
Yeah, it was 650, 700 million was put aside for that. Now, that court case is still
57 million.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's going to go back to the dealers for perceived abuses by the manufacturer.
It was the way agency was introduced out there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The Australian Automotive Dealers Association, and the listeners of the show will know that James Fortman, the chairman of the Australian Automotive Dealers Association, who was right at the center of that court case and got it going. We interviewed him recently, and it's agency by itself was not the issue. It's the way it was rolled out. It was the way that was introduced. That was the issue with it there. And of course, we don't know how that's going to come out yet. That court case, as we're recording this at the moment, is still on. It's still happening. But I think there's going to be lots of manufacturers around the world. We're watching that very, very closely to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think there'd be more class actions. And, I've talked to dealers. I showed you some correspondence I had with a dealer before the broadcast. There's going to be a lot of that. And I'm confident. I have some confidentiality. I can't tell you directly what I know and who I know it by, but
it would
there's going to be a legal nightmare in the U.S. I think it's going to be across Europe because these dealers. You got to remember, dealers have built mammoth facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Mammoth facilities. If you look at some of the square footage of the, especially out west. Longo Toyota.
Mm-hmm.
Longo Toyota is probably the biggest land area, biggest square footage dealer in the country, maybe the world. I mean, you look at some of these manufacturers have required that dealers have certain facility requirements that they met and they invested in.
Yep.
And now Ford Motor Company has told the dealers in the U.S., and Ford is leading the rush to divesting their dealers, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, I said my opinion, that's some legal stuff. But anyway, in my opinion, Ford is leading the way to divesting their dealers. They have just put $1 million premium on being able to sell electric cars.
Well, I was going to say, this is where it would appear that Europe, we're further ahead than what's happened in the States at this stage. I mean, there's so many brands that agency is happening.
It's the test market.
And it's
Europe is the test.
And it's also so many electric vehicles, they really are launched under agency. Is it agency by stealth? Let's look at Ford. Let's just start a whole new company and let's do their electric vehicles through that. Is that what you think is happening out there with Ford?
Well, the current administration, the current political power in the United States has sort of mandated, there's no law, it's just an executive declaration, but they've mandated that by 2030, 2035, I think California actually legislated by 2030 that the will be no more electric vehicles sold new in the state and in the United States. But they got to remember, when politics change, that's just an executive mandate. It's not a law.
Well, Jim, we have the same thing.
Manufacturers yeah, exactly. 2030, that's in Europe as well.
Well, UK, yeah.
And in the UK for sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, the manufacturers have bought into that. They bought into the Tesla. Look at the profitability of Tesla. It equals the profitability of the big three U.S. corporations put together.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, Tesla is an illusion. Tesla's having all sorts of problems. And you mentioned Carvana.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Carvana is, if you ever pull up their consumer reviews, and I think their license, I think it was Michigan just canceled their license. There might have been one of the Midwest states just canceled Carvana's license for not being able to produce titles. Carvana is not the be all end all. A certain number of consumers will take their cars at the house. They will do home delivery. Mm-hmm. And I'm an advocate of that. I'm an advocate of multi-channel retailing, where we deliver at the dealership, we deliver at their workplace, we sell completely online. Most dealers have digital retailing.
Yes.
And I've been in the business 48 years, and I'm teaching digital retailing. And I'm talking about how to sell cars digitally. Now, I'm an F&I expert. My F&I schools are on my website. But now we have to talk about service contracts for electric vehicles with electric vehicle components. I mean, everything has shifted and changed. Great, but the dealers in the U.S. anyway are shifting with the paradigm.
The Carvanas of the world, the Cinches of the world. I don't know why they're the disruptors. I don't think they are. There's nothing they can do that the dealer can't do anyway. I just think that what they have is maybe an advertising budget that maybe a dealer hasn't got. There's a big dealer group over here run by a man called Robert Forrester. And he turned around and said, I sat down and I had a look at everything that Cinch is doing over here. These kazoos are doing over here. And he said, well, hold on. When I looked at it, there's only one thing they've got that we can't do. And that is vans running up and down the motorway. We do digital retailing. We do finance online. We can deliver the car. They can do everything, but maybe better than what these kazoos of the world can do. And maybe Carvanas, I understand their share price has really struggled. Over here, Kazoo, 7 billion, I think they floated for. I think they're down well less than a billion last time I checked them. I think it's like 700,000, 600,000.
The public's catching on. These people, if you look at Carvana, the founder of Carvana, convicted felon.
Ernest Garcia, is that right?
Yeah, the senior. The senior. Okay. He was part of the Charles Keating savings and loan scandal back in the early 80s.
That just leaves me to say that all details of this episode and other episodes on the selling in the motor trade can be found on our website, symcotraining.co.uk. Go there to get a copy of our book, Words That Sell Cars. Go there to sign up to a free trial of our Sales Fitness online sales training program. Easiest way to get hold of me is Simon Bowkett through LinkedIn.